Hey everyone, welcome back to Mithun Diaries. There are some buildings that become more than just concrete and steel. They become symbols of ambition, symbols of success, symbol of power, and sometimes regret. In the art of Bengaluru, surrounded by glass skyscrapers, luxury boutiques, and five-star hotels, stand two landmarks that have become part of the city's identity. One is UB City, the other is the magnificent Kingfisher Towers. To many people, they are simply beautiful buildings. To architects, they represent a new era of Indian luxury. To investors, they symbolize one of the most ambitious business empires India had ever seen. And to millions of Indians, they tell the story of one man, a man who was once called the king of good times, a businessman who built brands recognized across the world, a man who changed the way India marketed premium products. He is the one who helped make Indian aviation feel luxurious. He is the one who brought Formula One to India. He is the one who owned an IPL franchisee. He is the one who entertained celebrities, politicians, industrialists, sports stars, and royalty. A man whose lifestyle became front page news. Private jets, luxury yachts, vintage cars, exclusive parties, international business meetings, and a personality larger than life. His name, Vijay Mallya. But every great rise carries within the possibility of a great fall. Because just a few years later, the very man who represented luxury would become one of India's most controversial businessmen. His airline would collapse, thousands of employees would be left wondering how they would pay their bills, banks would begin a long legal battle to recover loans, investors would watch their shares lose nearly all their value, and the penthouse built for him would remain empty. How does someone rise so high only to lose almost everything? Was it reckless ambition? Was it economic misfortune? Was it the business decisions that went wrong? Or a combination of all of these? This is not a story about heroes and villains. It is a story about vision. It is a story about risk, success, failure, and the price that sometimes comes with dreaming bigger than everyone else. Before we explore the collapse, we first need to understand the rise. Because long before the world knew Vijay Mallya, there was another man, his father. The story begins decades before Kingfisher Airlines, decades before UBCT, decades before Formula One. The foundation was laid by the United Breweries Group, commonly known as the UB Group. Although the group's roots go back to 1915, one of the most influential figures in its later growth was Vittal Mallya, Vijay Mallya's father. Vittal Mallya was known as a disciplined businessman who expanded the group's interests beyond brewing into pharmaceuticals, chemicals, engineering, and other sectors. He believed that a company should not depend on a single product or industry. The philosophy would shape the future of the UB group. In 1983, Vittal Mallya passed away unexpectedly. His son, Vijay Mallya, was only 28 years old. Many observers questioned whether someone so young could lead such a large business empire. Some believed he would simply inherit wealth, others wondered if the group would lose direction. But Vijay Mallya surprised many. He took charge at an age when most people are still building their careers. Instead of shrinking the business, he began reshaping it. He focused on building strong consumer brands, expanding internationally, and giving the UB Group a bold public identity. Rather than staying behind the scenes, he became the face of the company. He understood something that many Indian businesses had not fully embraced at that time. People don't just buy products, they buy stories, they buy aspirations, they buy identities. This thinking transformed Kingfisher beer from a successful beverage into a lifestyle brand associated with celebration, youth, and premium experiences. Advertising campaigns became more sophisticated. Sports sponsorships grew. The Kingfisher logo appeared in places that made people dream bigger. For many consumers in the 1990s and early 2000s, the Kingfisher name came to represent confidence, glamour, and modern India. At the same time, India itself was changing. Economic liberalization had opened new opportunities. Foreign companies were entering the market. The middle class was still growing. Cities like Bengaluru were becoming technology hubs with global ambitions. The country's aspirations were rising, and Vijay Mallya understood that mood. He wasn't content with selling beer, he wanted to build an ecosystem of premium brands, one that connected hospitality, entertainment, sports, aviation, and lifestyle. It was an ambitious vision. Some admired it, others thought it was too bold. But there was no denying that Vijay Mallya had become one of the most recognizable business leaders in the country. His confidence, charisma, and willingness to think differently set him apart. Yet, every expansion brings greater complexity. Every new venture brings greater financial risk. And every success raises expectations. Those expectations would soon lead him into one of the most challenging industries in the world. An industry where even experienced global airlines struggle to make profits. An industry shaped by fuel prices, regulation, intense competition, and economic cycles. That industry was aviation. And when Vijay Mallya entered it, he didn't just want to operate another airline. He wanted to redefine what it meant to fly in India. He believed air travel could be more than transportation. It could be an experience, comfortable, stylish, memorable. The dream was bold, the timing seemed perfect, but as his history would later show, building an airline is very different from building a beer brand. Imagine boarding an Indian flight in the early 2000s. The airport was busy, security checks were slower than today. Most passengers were flying for business or family emergencies, not for leisure. Flying was still considered a luxury. For many middle class Indians, boarding an aircraft was a once in a lifetime experience. The airlines that dominated the skies included Air India, Indian Airlines, and Jet Airways. Each had its strengths. Air India connected India to the world. Indian Airlines handled much of the domestic network. Jet Airways had earned a reputation for professionalism and reliable service. But the overall flying experience was different from what many passengers know today. Entertainment systems were limited, cabins focused more on transportation than experience. Passengers expected to reach their destination safely and on time, but few expected to be impressed. At the same time, India's economy was growing rapidly. The IT industry was booming. Cities such as Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai, Gurugram, and Noida were becoming business hubs. More professionals were traveling than ever before. India's middle class was expanding. The demand for air travel was rising every year. Vijay Mallya saw this transformation. And like many entrepreneurs, he asked a simple question: if people are willing to spend more for a better hotel, if they are willing to spend more for a better car, why shouldn't they enjoy a better airline? For him, flying wasn't just about getting from one city to another, it was about creating an unforgettable experience. Let's look at the vision of the Kingfisher. When Kingfisher Airlines launched in 2005, it didn't look like a typical Indian airline. Even before passengers boarded, the branding stood out. The aircraft wore bright red colors inspired by the Kingfisher brand. The interiors were modern, the lighting felt warmer, the seats were designed to offer greater comfort. Cabin crew training emphasized hospitality and presentation. For Vijay Mallya, every detail mattered. He believed people should remember the journey, not just the destination. That philosophy influenced almost every aspect of the airline. Imagine taking your seat on one of the early Kingfisher flights. You looked around and noticed something unusual. Many seats had individual entertainment screens. At a time when this was uncommon on Indian domestic routes, it felt remarkably modern. Passengers could watch movies, they could listen to music, they could follow the flight map, they could have browsed entertainment options. Children were excited, business travelers appreciated the comfort, families enjoyed the experience together, meals were presented with care, cabin announcements sounded polished. Even the uniforms became part of the airline's identity. People began talking about Kingfisher not just because it was new, but because it felt different. Within a few years, Kingfisher Airlines had become one of India's most recognized aviation brands. It expanded rapidly, new aircraft joined the fleet, more routes were added. The airline connected major cities while gradually expanding into international destinations. Soon after this, industry awards followed. Passengers praised the onboard service, travel magazines highlighted the experience. Many frequent flyers remember those years with genuine affection. Even today, if you speak to people who flew Kingfisher during its peak, many will tell you the same thing. It didn't feel like an ordinary flight, it felt special. Success as a way of changing markets, competitors began improving their own services. Cabin standards evolved, passenger expectations increased, airlines realized that comfort and customer experience could become powerful differentiators. Kingfisher wasn't solely responsible for every improvement in Indian aviation, but it became one of the companies that pushed competitors to think differently about the passenger experience. Let's understand the business behind the beauty. Soon after the initial success, there was another side of the story. Every smile from a cabin crew member, every gourmet meal, every entertainment screen, every premium service came with a cost, a very significant cost. Airlines operate in one of the toughest industries in the world. Unlike many businesses, an aircraft earns money only when it is flying with paying passengers. Yet the expenses continue even when it is on the ground. Aircraft leases, fuel, maintenance, insurance, airport charges, navigation fees, pilot salaries, engineer salaries, cabin crew salaries, training, ground handling, technology systems, every day, every hour, whether the airline makes a profit or not, and one expense stood above almost all the others: fuel. Now let's move on to the fuel challenge. Aviation turbine fuel, commonly called ATF, is one of the largest costs for any airline. In India, taxes on ATF were historically higher than in many other countries. This made airline operations more expensive. At the same time, global crude oil prices became increasingly volatile. Every increase in oil prices placed additional pressure on airlines. Margins became thinner, competition became tougher, and ticket prices could not always be increased without losing passengers. This wasn't a challenge unique to Kingfisher. Airlines around the world have struggled with the same economic reality. Many famous international airlines have entered bankruptcy protection or shut down despite having loyal customers. Aviation can be glamorous from the outside. Behind the scenes, it is one of the most demanding businesses on earth. Despite these challenges, Vijay Mallya wanted to grow faster, much faster. Instead of building the airline gradually over many years, he saw an opportunity to expand almost overnight. There was another airline in India, one with a very different philosophy. While Kingfisher focused on premium service, this airline focused on affordable fares. Its founder believed that every Indian should be able to fly. Its name was Air Deccan. What happened next would become one of the most debated decisions in Indian corporate history. Kingfisher acquired Air Deccan. Supporters believed the acquisition would instantly expand Kingfisher's network and help it qualify for international operations more quickly under the regulations of the time. Critics argued that combining a premium full service airline with a low cost carrier created operational and also financial challenges that were difficult to manage. Years later, business schools would study this decision, not because the idea lacked ambition, but because it illustrated how rapidly expansion can increase complexity. The merger marked a turning point. For a brief moment, it looked like Vijay Mallya's aviation dream was becoming unstoppable. But beyond the headlines, storm clouds were already beginning to gather. Fuel prices were climbing, debt was increasing, the global economy was about to face one of its biggest crises in decades, and Kingfisher Airlines was about to enter the most difficult chapter of its journey. By 2006, Kingfisher Airlines had become one of India's fastest growing airlines. Passengers loved the service, travel magazines praised the airline, international aviation organizations recognized its onboard experience. For Vijay Mallya, the dream was becoming reality. But in business, sometimes success creates the biggest temptation, the temptation to grow even faster. India was changing rapidly. The economy was growing at one of the fastest rates in the world. Middle class incomes were increasing. Thousands of people who had never flown before were booking their first flights. For decades, train travel had been India's backbone, but now millions wanted something faster. Air travel was no longer reserved only for industrialists and politicians. Teachers, engineers, doctors, software professionals, students, families, everyone wanted to fly. The opportunity seemed endless. The aviation market suddenly became crowded. Jet Airways continued expanding. Air India remained a major player. Low cost airlines like SpiceJet and Go Air were entering the market, and then there was Air Deccan. Air Deccan was founded by Captain G.R. Gopinath. Air Deccan had one mission to make flying affordable for ordinary Indians. Its slogan reflected a simple idea: now everyone can fly. Instead of offering luxury, Air Deccan focused on low fares. Passengers accepted fewer comforts in exchange for cheaper tickets. The strategy worked. The airline connected many smaller cities that previously had limited air services. But low cost airlines also operated on very thin profit margins. Every rupee mattered. And then came Vijay Mallya's big decision. In 2007, Vijay Mallya made one of the biggest decisions of his business career. Kingfisher Airlines acquired a controlling stake in Air Deccan. The move surprised many. Why would a premium airline buy a budget airline? There were several strategic reasons discussed by analysts at the time. First, Air Deccan already had a large domestic network. Second, the acquisition significantly increased Kingfisher's market share. Third, under the aviation rules in force then, airlines needed a certain level of domestic operational experience before launching international services. Acquiring Air Deccan strengthened Kingfisher's position as it planned future international expansion. On paper, the strategy appeared ambitious, perhaps even brilliant. A premium airline combined with a low-cost airline covering almost every segment of the market. Many believed Vijay Mallya was building India's next aviation giant. But mergers are never simple. Buying a company is much easier than integrating it. Kingfisher and Air Deccan were built on completely different philosophies. Kingfisher focused on premium service, Air Deccan focused on keeping costs as low as possible. One believed passengers would pay for a better experience, the other believed affordable tickets would attract more people to fly. Bringing these two business models together created operational complexity. Fleet planning became more difficult, brand positioning became less clear, systems, staffing, schedules, and customer expectations all had to be aligned. Many mergers around the world face similar challenges. Some succeed, some struggle. This one would become one of India's most discussed corporate integrations. Then came 2008. The world changed. The global financial crisis shook economies across continents. Major banks collapsed, credit markets tightened, businesses cut travel budgets, consumer confidence weakened, demand for air travel slowed in many regions. At the same time, global crude oil prices had risen sharply before falling later in the crisis. This created significant volatility. For airlines, fuel costs become harder to predict and manage. For an airline with rapid expansion plans, these conditions created enormous pressure. Many people assume airlines make huge profits because flights are often full. The reality is far more complex. An airline has to pay for aircraft leases or financing. They have to look after fuel, maintenance, insurance, airport fees, air traffic navigation charges, ground handling, pilot and crew salaries, training, technology, compliance, customer service, and many of these costs continue whether an aircraft is full, half full, or temporarily grounded. Even a small increase in expenses or a drop in demand can have a major impact on profitability. This is one reason why aviation is often described as one of the toughest businesses in the world. As Kingfisher expanded, its financial commitments also grew. Industry observers began asking difficult questions. Could the airline maintain premium service while managing rising costs? Could the Air Deccan integration deliver the expected benefits? Would future passenger growth be enough to support the expansion? These questions did not have simple answers. From the outside, the airline still looked successful. Passengers continued flying. The brand remained aspirational. Advertising projected confidence. But inside the business, the financial pressures were becoming harder to ignore. Through all of this, Vijay Mallya remained one of India's most recognizable businessmen. He attended international events, he supported sports teams, he promoted the Kingfisher brand across multiple industries. To many people, he embodied confidence and ambition. Supporters admired his willingness to dream big. Critics questioned whether the pace of expansion was sustainable. As with many high-profile entrepreneurs, opinions about him became increasingly polarized. History often looks obvious in hindsight. At the time, few people could predict exactly how events would unfold. Kingfisher Airlines still had loyal customers, it still had talented employees, it still had a respected brand, but the business environment had become much more challenging. The coming years would test not only the airline but everyone connected to it: employees, passengers, investors, banks, and Vijay Mallya himself. The next chapter would no longer be about rapid growth, it would be about difficult choices. There is a saying in aviation: an aircraft on the ground costs almost as much as an aircraft in the sky, but only one of them earns money. By the end of 2008, Kingfisher Airlines had built an impressive reputation. Passengers admired the service, competitors respected the brand, international awards recognized its quality, Yet, behind the polished image, the economics of running the airline were becoming increasingly difficult. Running an airline is unlike almost any other business. A hotel can close a floor if demand fails, a factory can reduce production, a retailer can slow new orders, but an airline cannot easily stop paying many of its biggest expenses. Aircraft lease payments continue, maintenance schedules cannot be ignored, pilots and engineers require continuous training, airport parking charges continue, insurance must be paid, fuel suppliers expect payment, airports expect payment, every aircraft represents a major financial commitment. Kingfisher had invested heavily in creating a premium experience. That experience had helped build one of India's most admired airline brands. But premium service also meant higher operating costs. Every additional comfort came with a price. The 2008 global financial crisis affected businesses across the world. Companies reduced travel budgets, consumers became more cautious, financing became more difficult to obtain. Many airlines, not only in India but globally, faced severe financial pressure. Some reduced routes, others postponed aircraft deliveries. Several airlines around the world entered bankruptcy protection or shutdown. Kingfisher was now operating in one of the toughest business environments the aviation industry had seen in years. As the airline expanded, it relied on financing from a consortium of banks and financial institutions. Borrowing is common in aviation. Aircrafts are expensive assets, and airlines around the world often use loans or leasing arrangements to grow. The challenge comes when revenue growth slows while debt obligations continue. Interest payments increase, cash flow becomes tighter, every delayed payment creates pressure elsewhere in the business. For Kingfisher, managing this balance became increasingly difficult. Initially, most passengers noticed very little. Flights still continued to operate, the cabins still looked elegant, the uniforms remained iconic, the airline still projected confidence, but gradually, reports of schedule changes and operational disruptions began to appear. Some routes were reduced, certain flights were cancelled, the public image of effortless success started to show signs of strain. Behind every airline are thousands of people: pilots, cabin crew, aircraft engineers, ground staff, check in agents, dispatchers, load controllers, call center employees, cleaners, security personnel, administrative teams. Many had joined Kingfisher mainly because they believed they were working for one of India's most prestigious airlines. They took pride in the uniform. Passengers often praised them for their professionalism. But as financial pressures increased, salary payments began to be delayed for some employees. Public reports from the period describe growing uncertainty among staff. For many families, monthly salaries were essential for paying rent, school fees, loan installments, and daily expenses. Employees faced difficult choices while continuing to report for duty and maintain professional standards. Some remained hopeful that the situation would improve, others began looking for opportunities with competing airlines. Several former employees have later spoken publicly about the emotional stress of that period. Even during difficult months, many loyal customers continued choosing Kingfisher. Why? Because they remembered the experience. They remembered the hospitality, the comfortable cabins, the attention to detail, the feeling that flying could be enjoyable rather than merely functional. A strong brand can earn customer loyalty, but loyalty alone cannot solve financial problems. An airline must also maintain healthy cash flow and sustainable operations. While Kingfisher struggled, competitors were adopting. Low cost carriers focused relentlessly on efficiency. Every unnecessary expense was questioned, aircraft turnaround times were shortened, fleet commonality reduced maintenance complexity. Business models evolved to keep costs under control. The Indian aviation market was changing rapidly, passengers increasingly compared fares. Affordable travel became a decisive factor for many customers. The balance between premium service and financial sustainability became even more difficult. Only a few years earlier, newspaper headlines had celebrated Vijay Mallya's expansion into aviation. Now, questions began appearing: could the airline recover? Would fresh investment arrive? Could lenders restructure the debt? Business television channels discussed the airline almost daily. Financial analysts debated possible outcomes. Yet, for employees arriving at work each morning, the questions were far more personal. Would salaries arrive this month? Would flights operate as scheduled? Would the airline survive? History often celebrates ambition, but history also reminds us that rapid growth carries risk. Kingfisher Airlines demonstrated that creating a world class customer experience is only one part of building a successful airline. Long term sustainability requires careful management of costs, financing, and changing market conditions. These lessons are studied in business schools to this day, not because the airline lacked vision, but because vision alone is not enough. As 2011 approached, the warning signs were no longer confined to boardrooms and financial statements, they were becoming visible to employees, passengers, investors, and the entire aviation industry. The next chapter would bring the most difficult period in Kingfisher Airlines history, a period marked by ground aircraft, regulatory action, uncertainty for employees, and the eventual suspension of operations. Every airline dreams of growth: more aircraft, more destinations, more passengers, more opportunities. But every airline also depends on one thing above all else, that is trust. Passengers trust that their flight will depart, employees trust that their work will be rewarded, suppliers trust that invoices will be paid, banks trust that loans will be repaid, and regulators trust that safety and operational standards will be maintained. When that trust begins to weaken, the consequences spread quickly. By 2012, Kingfisher Airlines was under immense financial strain. Cash flow had become a major challenge. Several aircraft were no longer operating because of financial and operational issues. The airline reduced schedules and cancellations became more common. For passengers, this meant uncertainty. For employees, it meant something much deeper. When people think of an airline, they often think of aircraft. But an airline is built by people: pilots, cabin crew, aircraft maintenance engineers, ground handlers, dispatchers, customer service teams, operation controllers, finance staff, IT professionals, security personnel. Thousands of people work together every day to keep flights moving safely. As salary delays become a recurring issue, many employees found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. Public reports from that period describe employees struggling to manage household expenses, school fees, rent, and loan repayments. Some continued working despite not knowing when they would next be paid. Others eventually resigned and sought employment with other airlines. Many later described the period as emotionally exhausting. Yet, even during those months, employees continued performing safety, critical duties with professionalism whenever flights operated. Their dedication is remembered by many former passengers. For travelers, the uncertainty was equally frustrating. Some passengers arrived at airports only to discover that flights had been cancelled or rescheduled. Business meetings were missed, family events were disrupted, travel plans changed at the last minute. Competing airlines observed many of these passengers, but the experience highlighted how quickly operational difficulties at one airline could affect thousands of people across the country. Civil aviation is one of the most closely regulated industries in the world. Airlines must demonstrate not only safe operations but also the ability to continue operating reliably. As Kingfisher's operational disruptions increased, India's aviation regulator took a closer look at the airline situation. In October 2012, After a series of operational and compliance concerns, the airline's operating permit was suspended. Without that permit, scheduled commercial flights could no longer continue. For many observers, this marked the effective end of Kingfisher Airlines operations. The suspension was not the result of a single event but a combination of operational, financial, and regulatory issues that had developed over time. Aircraft that once connected cities across India now remained parked. The distinctive red and white livery that had become so familiar gradually disappeared from regular schedules. Airport stands that had once been occupied by Kingfisher aircraft were reassigned. Slots at busy airports were redistributed over time to other airlines through regulatory processes. India's aviation market moved forward, new carriers expanded, existing airlines increased capacity, passengers found other options. But for those who had built Kingfisher Airlines, it was the end of an era. An aircraft is one of the most valuable assets an airline owns or leases. Many of Kingfisher's aircraft were leased rather than fully owned. As operations stopped and lease obligations could not be met, lessors sought to recover their aircraft. Some planes were returned to leasing companies, others remained parked for extended periods before being moved or repurposed, depending on contractual and legal agreements. This is common in the aviation industry when airlines cease operations. Aircrafts are mobile assets, and leasing plays a central role in global aviation finance. The closure of an airline affects far more than the airline itself. Airports lose revenue, ground handling companies lose business, catering providers lose contracts, maintenance organizations lose work, travel agencies face customer claims, hotels, taxi operators, and tourism businesses may also feel the impact when connectivity is reduced. Kingfisher Airlines had become a significant part of India's aviation ecosystem. Its decline was felt across many sectors. Despite its collapse, many former passengers still speak fondly of the onboard experience. They remember the hospitality, the entertainment systems, the attention to detail, the sense that flying felt special. That lasting affection illustrates an important point. A strong brand can create loyal customers, but brand strength alone cannot overcome sustained financial and operational challenges. As the airline stopped flying, another chapter was beginning. Questions were now being asked by lenders. Shareholders wanted answers. Pilots who had spent years training, cabin crew who proudly wore the Kingfisher uniform, engineers responsible for keeping aircraft airworthy, ground staff who worked behind the scenes every single day. Many of them had joined the airline believing they were part of India's most premium aviation brand. When salary payments were delayed and operations slowed, it wasn't just a corporate crisis, it became a family crisis. School fees still had to be paid, rent still had to be paid, home loan EMIs continued, medical expenses did not stop. For many employees, every passing month brought another difficult question. How long can we keep going? Some eventually found jobs with other airlines, others changed industries completely. For many, the emotional impact lasted long after the airlines stopped flying. But employees were not the only people affected. Lakhs of ordinary investors had also believed in the Kingfisher story. Many purchased shares because they believed India's aviation market would continue growing. Some invested a few thousand rupees, others invested lakhs. As the company's financial condition deteriorated, the share price declined sharply. Eventually, the stock lost almost all of its value before being delisted. For investors, this was a painful reminder that buying shares means sharing both the upside and downside of a company's fortunes. Imagine someone investing 1 lakh rupees at the company's peak. As the stock price fell dramatically over time, the value of that investment would also have fallen substantially, illustrating the risks of concentrating investments in a single company. It's one of the reasons financial planners often emphasize diversification rather than putting all savings into one stock. Then there were the banks. Large businesses often require large loans. That's true not only in aviation but also in infrastructure, telecom, shipping, manufacturing, and energy sector. Aircraft, airports, and aviation infrastructure require enormous amounts of capital. Banks assess business plans, projected cash flows, collateral, and other factors before deciding whether to lend. When those businesses succeed, loans are repaid with interest. When they fail, recovery becomes much more complicated. Kingfisher Airlines had borrowed from a consortium of lenders. As the airline's finances worsened, these loans became the subject of restructuring efforts. This also paved way for recovery proceedings and later legal action. Whenever a large corporate loan becomes controversial, a common public question emerges. Why was such a large loan approved in the first place? That is a fair question. The answer is often more complex than it first appears. Large corporate lending typically involves multiple levels of approval, credit committees, financial analysis, collateral evaluation, and regulatory oversight. However, history has also shown that in some cases across the banking sector, not limited to any one company, investigations have found irregularities in lending decisions, and some bank officials have faced scrutiny or legal action where wrongdoing was alleged or established. Those cases have led to stronger banking regulations, tighter risk assessment, and greater oversight over large corporate lending. At the same time, many honest banking professionals work within strict rules to evaluate loans responsibly. The Kingfisher story also reopened a wider public debate that extends far beyond one airline. Many people ask, why do some borrowers find it difficult to obtain relatively small loans while large corporations are able to secure much larger amounts? This is a question that has been discussed for years. The reality is that banks assess different types of borrowers using different lending models. A home loan, an agricultural loan, a small business loan, and a large corporate loan are evaluated under different frameworks. Even so, many small entrepreneurs and farmers have spoken publicly about the challenges they face in accessing timely credit, while corporate lending has at times attracted public criticism when large defaulters occur. Those concerns have shaped public debate and prompted ongoing reforms in India's banking sector. The fall of Kingfisher Airlines is therefore not just a story about one businessman, it is also a story about risk, a story about rapid expansion, a story about debt, banking, regulation, employees who lost certainty, investors who lost money, and about an industry where success and failure can both happen at remarkable speed. But while the airline had stopped flying, the biggest battle was only just beginning. Not in the skies, but in the courts. Across multiple countries, between banks, investigating agencies, and Vijay Mallya himself, that story changed the course of Indian corporate history. When people hear about a company shutting down, they often think of balance sheets, debt, losses, court cases, financial headlines, but behind every company are people. Thousands of people, employees who dedicated years of their careers, passengers who trusted the airline, suppliers who depended on its business, investors who believed in its future, and lenders who financed its growth. The story of Kingfisher Airlines is not only about an airline that stopped flying, it is also about the many lives that were affected when a large business could no longer sustain its operations. An airline is one of the most people-intensive business in the world. Behind every flight are pilots, cabin crew, aircraft maintenance engineers, dispatchers, customer service agents, finance teams, IT professionals, cleaners, caterers, security staff, and many others. When operations became irregular and salary delays were reported, uncertainty spread throughout the workforce. Former employees have publicly described the emotional strain of that period. Many had financial commitments, rent, home loans, school fees, and family expenses that continued regardless of whether salaries arrived on time. Some found opportunities with other airlines, others moved into different industries. The skills they had developed remained valuable, but rebuilding careers took time. For many families, the end of the airline was not simply a business event, it was a deeply personal one. Passengers also felt the effects. Flight cancellations and reduced schedules disrupted travel plans, business meetings were postponed, family gatherings were missed, holiday plans changed. Although other airlines eventually absorbed much of the demand, the experience highlighted how interconnected the aviation industry is. When a major carrier leaves the market, the effects ripple across airports, tourism, logistics, and the broader economy. Then there were the shareholders. Many investors had purchased shares because they believed India's aviation sector had enormous long term potential. Kingfisher Airlines was a well known brand. Its aircraft were modern, its service was widely appreciated, its founder was one of India's most recognizable business leaders. To many investors, the company appeared to have a promising future, but the stock market reflects expectations as much as current performance. As concerns about the airline's financial position increased, investor confidence weakened. The share price declined sharply. Eventually, the stock lost almost all of its value before being delisted. For shareholders, this meant that investments made during more optimistic times suffered substantial losses. The experience serves as a reminder that even well known brands can face significant business risks. One of the most important lessons from this story is diversification. Imagine two investors. The first invests all of their savings in a single company's shares, the second spreads the same amount across different sectors and companies. If one business experiences severe difficulties, the diversified investor may still be protected by the performance of other investments. Diversification cannot eliminate risk, but it can reduce the impact of a single company's decline. That is why financial advisors often encourage investors to avoid concentrating too much of their portfolio in one stock or one industry. Businesses often require financing to grow. In aviation, that need is even greater because aircraft, maintenance, technology, and infrastructure require substantial capital. Banks and financial institutions evaluate loan applications using factors such as business plans, projected cash flows, collateral, industry conditions, and regulatory requirements. When a business succeeds, loans are repaid over time. When it struggles, lenders may first explore restructuring or other recovery options before pursuing legal remedies, depending on the circumstances. Kingfisher Airlines lenders were part of a consortium that later sought recovery through various legal and regulatory processes. The recovery of large corporate loans can be complex and may involve courts, tribunals, insolvency proceedings, and asset related actions. Business schools around the world study both successful and unsuccessful companies, not to assign blame but to understand decisions. Kingfisher Airlines is often discussed in the context of rapid expansion, integration challenges following acquisitions, capital intensive industries, cash flow management, debt and leverage, branding versus financial sustainability, corporate governance, risk management. The airline story demonstrates that a strong brand and a loyal customer base are valuable, but they do not replace disciplined financial management. Even after operations ceased, Kingfisher Airlines left a lasting mark on Indian aviation. Many passengers remember the airline for raising expectations about service quality. Competitors continued improving the passenger experience, the industry evolved, low cost carriers refined their business models, premium airlines adopted, the market continued to grow. In that sense, Kingfisher's influence extended beyond its years of operation. Every business story contains both achievements and setbacks. Kingfisher Airlines introduced innovations that many travelers appreciated. Its collapse also illustrated the challenges of operating in one of the world's most demanding industries. The lessons extend beyond aviation, they are relevant to entrepreneurs, investors, lenders, policymakers, and anyone interested in how businesses grow and how they sometimes struggle. History remembers companies in different ways. Some are remembered because they lasted for generations, some because they invented something revolutionary, and some because they changed an industry, even though they didn't survive. Kingfisher Airlines belongs to that last category. Its operations came to an end, but many of the ideas it popularized continued to influence how airlines thought about the passenger experience. Before the mid 2000s, many travelers viewed flying as simply a way to reach the destination. Kingfisher challenged the mindset. It invested heavily in branding, cabin presentation, crew training, comfort, entertainment, attention to detail. Passengers began expecting more than just transportation. They expected hospitality. As competition intensified, airlines across India continued improving their own products. Some focused on punctuality, some focused on lower fares, others invested in customer experience. Every airline chose a different path, but the competition ultimately benefited travelers. While premium airlines competed on service, another transformation was taking place. Low cost carriers were proving that efficiency could make flying accessible to millions more Indians. Instead of offering every possible comfort, they focused on keeping aircraft in the air as much as possible. They also considered short turnaround times, simplified fleets, efficient operations, careful cost management. This approach helped reduce ticket prices and encouraged many first time flyers to choose air travel. Over the following decade, India's domestic aviation market expanded rapidly. More airports opened, regional connectivity improved, passenger numbers continued to grow. The industry evolved not because one airline succeeded or failed, but because many companies adapted to changing customer needs. Every entrepreneur dreams of building something extraordinary. Growth is exciting, expansion creates opportunities, success brings confidence, but growth also brings responsibility. One lesson repeated throughout business history is that scale must be matched by sustainable finances. Revenue matters, profit matters, but perhaps most importantly, cash flow matters. A company can own valuable assets, it can have a famous brand, it can win awards, yet, if it cannot consistently meet its financial obligations, even a respected business can face serious challenges. This lesson extends far beyond aviation, it applies to technology, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, construction, almost every industry. The story also offers important lessons for investors. A strong brand is not always the same as a strong investment. Popularity alone does not determine long term value. Investors often evaluate businesses by asking difficult questions. How much debt does the company carry? Can it generate consistent cash flow? How resilient is it during economic downturns? How dependent is it on one industry? These questions become especially important in sectors that require large amounts of capital. Diversification is another enduring lesson. Spreading investments across different companies and sectors cannot eliminate risk, but it can reduce the impact of one company's decline. Many experienced investors describe diversification as a way of preparing not for the future they expect, but for the future they cannot predict. As the airline disappeared from Indian skies, another part of the Kingfisher story remained firmly rooted in Bengaluru, UB city. Walking through its plazas today, visitors see luxury boutiques, restaurants, offices, and public spaces. The architecture reflects an ambition to create an international business destination in the center of the city. Nearby, Kingfisher Towers continues to stand prominently on Bengaluru's skyline. Its distinctive design and premium residences remain among the city's best known landmarks. These buildings remind us that businesses often leave behind physical legacies even when individual ventures change or end. Cities continue to evolve, buildings gain new stories, people continue to visit them, sometimes knowing little about the history that shaped them. The rise and fall of any major company rarely has a single cause. Markets change, competition changes, economic conditions change, consumer behavior changes, leadership decisions matter, timing matters, execution matters. Sometimes success depends on all of them aligning. Sometimes challenges emerge from several directions at once. That complexity is why business schools continue studying major corporate successes and failures, not to find simple answers, but to understand difficult decisions in uncertain environments. Even years later, Kingfisher Airlines remains part of conversations about branding, entrepreneurship, aviation, and finance. Some remember the exceptional service, others remember the financial lessons. Many remember both. Perhaps that is why the story continues to resonate. It is not merely about an airline, it is about ambition, innovation, risk, and the reality that building something extraordinary often involves navigating extraordinary challenges. The aircraft may no longer carry the Kingfisher name, but the lessons continue to fly. We'll step back from the headlines and ask a broader question: what can entrepreneurs, employees, investors, and ordinary citizens learn from one of the most talked about business stories in modern India? As we come to the end of this documentary, one thing becomes clear. The story of Vijay Mallya is far more complex than a single headline. To some, he will always be remembered as the man who transformed a beer brand into a global lifestyle icon. He was the one who introduced a premium flying experience to millions of Indians and helped create landmarks like UB City and Kingfisher Towers. These buildings still continue to define Bengaluru's skyline. To others, his story is a reminder that even the biggest business empires can face extraordinary challenges and that ambition must always be matched with financial discipline, governance, and sustainable growth. History often remembers both achievements and failures. The rise inspires us, the fall teaches us, and perhaps that is why this story continues to be discussed years later. Not because it has simple answers, but because it raises difficult questions about entrepreneurship, risk, leadership, finance, and the price of dreaming big. Whether you admire his vision, question his decisions, or see elements of both, one fact remains undeniable: the Kingfisher story changed Indian aviation. It influenced branding, it shaped conversations about business, banking, and corporate governance, and it left behind lessons that entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders continues to study even today. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of India's most fascinating business stories. If you found this documentary informative, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who enjoys business and history, and subscribe to Mithun Diaries for more in depth documentaries that go beyond the headlines. And this is just the beginning. In our next episode, we will explore the remarkable life of another visionary entrepreneur whose dream changed the way India drinks coffee. He was called the Coffee King. He built one of India's most loved cafe chains, inspired a generation of entrepreneurs, and left behind a story filled with ambition, innovation, success, and heartbreak. The story of VG Siddhartha, the founder of Cafe Coffee Day. This is not just about coffee, it's about courage, pressure, business, and the human side of entrepreneurship. You won't want to miss it. Until then, I am Mithun, and this is Mithun Diaries. Thank you for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next documentary.